This PDF file police officer had hundreds of victims as young as 10 years old. He was using his position as a police officer to find and abuse victims. He was abusing underage girls while on duty, clocked in as a police officer. Growing up, Lewis Edwards was never anything remarkable. He was a pretty average student living a pretty average life. Lewis was a loner. He would just lock himself in his bedroom every single day and spend hours and hours on his computer. At 18 years old, Lewis entered the police academy and began training to become a police officer. Also significant around this time is the lockdowns started. It was 2020. And at this time, Lewis was viewing and purchasing child SA material like CP off the dark web. Lewis found and joined this online group of other PDF files that would buy and sell child SA material. And for Lewis, viewing and buying these photos and videos of underage girls, children, became this sick, disgusting obsession. And after a while of purchasing these photos and videos off the dark web, Lewis wanted to become the one that was producing and distributing them. So Lewis turned to Snapchat to find victims. He created a bunch of fake Snapchat accounts under fake names with fake profile pictures, pretending to be a young teenage boy. Lewis was then using these accounts to find and speak to underage girls. There were hundreds of children. Lewis himself is like 21, 22, 23 years old, and his victims ranged in ages from 16 years old to only 10 years old, with the majority of his victims being 12 years old. When Lewis first began messaging these girls on Snapchat, he would befriend them, he would shower them in compliments, he would, pretend to be interested in their lives and their hobbies and their families and their friends. Sometimes he would even pretend to be a boy in a grade above them from their own school. When he made it out of the academy and actually started working as a police officer for the South Wales Police Department, he would use his position to actually find where his victims went to school and even where they lived. And he would use all of this information to blackmail his victims. After befriending these girls online and gaining their trust, he would then try to make these really young girls, these children, feel bad for him, and he would do this in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes he would say he had a really young sister who was so sick that she was in the hospital. Sometimes he would say that he was bullied at school, he had a bad home life, and that he was really depressed. He would start demanding photos and videos from these children constantly. And he would tell them that all the other girls their age were doing it to try and make them feel weird for not sending him these photos and videos. And if that didn't work, he would emotionally blackmail them by saying that he would unalive himself if they didn't send him the photos and videos that he wanted. Lewis would also send these children, okay? They're like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. Google Map photos of their own houses because he found out where they lived. So he'd be like, hey, send me these photos or videos. I know where you live. And if you don't send me the photos and videos I want, I'll show up to your house and I will kill your parents. Another way that Lewis blackmailed these literal children, remember, he's like an adult and a police officer, and he's doing this to children, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls. Remember, he would tell a lot of them that he actually went to the same school as them, and after he would get like one photo from them, he would use that to blackmail them and say if they didn't send him even more extreme photos and videos, that he would send that photo to everyone at their school. His abuse is escalating, and he's demanding more and more from these children. It's the sickest, most vile things that you could ever imagine. And remember how Lewis used to buy a lot of child essay material from other PDF files off the dark web? Well, he was then sending those videos to these little girls and forcing these little girls to watch horrific videos of other children being horrifically abused and SA'd. He was demanding up to 50 videos, 50 videos a day from each of these children. These are children, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. They are terrified and they feel like they have no choice but to do what this person is asking them to do. If they said no, they were told that he would either unalive himself and it would be their fault, that he would show up at their homes and kill their parents, or send these photos and videos to everyone that they knew. In a lot of these videos, the girls are doing what Lewis wants them to do, but they're crying. They're crying their eyes out and they're begging him to stop and to leave them alone. And a lot of these little girls were actually contemplating unaliving themselves because of what this grown-up, this adult police officer is forcing them to do for his own sick enjoyment. Lewis was abusing hundreds of little girls from his cell phone, and he was doing this while on duty, clocked in as a police officer. He was also using his position as a cop to find other victims. There was one occasion where a 15-year-old girl called the cops on her stepfather, and Lewis was one of the cops that responded to the call. Lewis is an adult, he's a police officer, and he sees this vulnerable young girl who has something going on in her life that she needs to call the police on her stepfather. And a few days later, after that call, he finds her online by looking up her information and starts victimizing and blackmailing her. He's literally pure evil. And he's getting away with all of this for years. And then around 2022, the South Wales Police Department, which was the police department that Lewis worked for, was doing an investigation on PDF files online. And through this investigation, they found evidence that there was an individual in Wales that was purchasing child essay material off the dark web. And in December of 2022, they tracked down this individual's IP address to their very own South Wales police officer, Lewis Edwards. For 6 weeks after that, they investigated him. It was a huge scale investigation, but it was a secret because they didn't want him to find out and then destroy any of the evidence. But for 6 long weeks, he was able to continue to abuse these little girls. And finally, in February of 2023, Lewis was arrested at his home that he shared with his parents. And while the police are there seizing all of his devices, Lewis actually gives his mom 3 of his cell phones and asks her to bury the evidence in their backyard, and she actually does. An absolute disgrace. But she was caught and she was also arrested, and she was given a 2-year prison sentence. At the time, there was only evidence that Lewis was buying and viewing child essay material online, but once they have all of his devices, they find mountains of evidence of everything I just told you and more. They found close to 5,000 photos and videos that he got from abusing and blackmailing children off Snapchat. They also found evidence of over 200 separate victims that ranged in ages from 16 years old to only 10 years old. He was arrested by the same police department that he worked for, and he was interrogated by some of the same officers that he worked closely with every single day. This was actually when his victims and his victims' families found out that they were not being blackmailed by a 13-year-old boy, and it was actually an adult and a police officer. He was being charged with over 160 separate charges, and to avoid a trial, he pled guilty to all of them. He refused to even attend his own sentencing hearing, but at that hearing, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of early release after only 12 years. But the judge that sentenced him said because Lewis is such a danger to society that there is a real chance that he will never be let out of prison. And that is the entire case of the PDF file police officer Lewis Edwards. He makes my skin crawl. I never want to think about this person ever again. But I do think it is important to share these stories even though they are so uncomfortable to talk about. Just because someone wears a uniform doesn't mean that they're always someone that we should trust. It's important for children to know that. It's also important for parents to know that, and for parents to be aware of the dangers of these social media apps. It's extremely important to educate our children about the dangers on the internet. I'm interested to hear all of your thoughts and opinions on this case in the comments, but I urge all of you to please be respectful. The victims in this case were children when this happened, and because this only happened a few years ago, many of his victims are still underage today. There's still an extremely good chance that they're still on social media and that they might come across this video. So just keep that in mind while you're in the comments to please just be respectful. If you try to victim blame any of the children in this case, I do not care and I will block you. I never need to worry about my core audience. My core audience is always respectful, and for that I love you guys so much and I thank you guys so much. While you guys are in the comments, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.